In the bustling town of Henan, beneath a starlit sky, the streets glowed with the warm red light of lanterns. Laughter filled the air as people enjoyed the night. Yet their attention was drawn to a curious sight in the center of the crowd. There sat a man who ate as though there would be no tomorrow, devouring food with tears streaming down his face. One concerned onlooker whispered that someone should stop him, wondering aloud if the man would die from eating so much, and questioning why he cried while feasting on such a hearty meal. Another bystander shook his head knowingly. He explained that this was likely the first time the newcomer had seen him, for the man was well known throughout Henan. The newcomer guessed that the man was famous for his striking appearance, but the seasoned local scoffed. He told him that a true merchant should know better than to judge people only by their looks. With a sharper tone, he added that the man clearly had much to learn. He explained that although the newcomer was not from the area, he must have at least heard of the unprecedented feat the man before them had achieved. He had unified every merchant union in all of Henan. The newcomer's eyes widened in disbelief. He repeated the words in astonishment, unable to believe that one man had unified every merchant union. The local confirmed it with certainty. He revealed the man's name and title. He was Yong of the Sky Ocean Merchant Union, the grand merchant who had brought every union under one banner. At that moment, a voice cried out behind Yong, pointing directly at Yong. The voice accused him of eating far beyond reason, claiming that while ordinary people ate 3 meals in a day, he consumed 3 days' worth in a single sitting. A woman rushed forward, clutching at his clothes with desperation. She begged him to stop eating, her voice breaking with fear as she reminded him that such gluttony would harm his health. Yong turned his tearful face toward her. His voice trembled as he explained that if he stopped eating, the memories of that nightmarish day would return to haunt him. The woman froze, her grip loosening. With anguish, she asked if he truly intended to live like this until it killed him. Huern could only respond by calling her name, his voice weak and broken. Yanhua. Later that night, the two of them left the town and sat together inside a carriage. Huern removed the jewelry from his body, setting it aside with weary hands. He admitted that all the riches and gaudy jewels felt meaningless now. His indulgence in food and wealth, he confessed, had only been a way to mask a wound that could never heal. The pain of losing people, he reflected, could only be soothed by the presence of others, yet he was still plagued by nightmares of that tragic day. Yonhua looked at him with deep concern, addressing him softly as young master. Huern gave her a small, almost bitter smile, and pointed out that it had been ages since he had become the head of the Sky Ocean Union. Yet, she still called him by the same title instead of head merchant. Yonhua's voice remained steady. No matter how much time had passed, she told him, he would always remain the master of the Tianzhong clan in her heart. Huern's thoughts grew heavy as he studied her face. Only then did he notice the wrinkles that had begun to form. He remembered how she had continued to serve him even after he abandoned his clan and married into another family. To him, she was more than a servant. She was family. Without her, he believed, he would have long since been dead. His memories surged violently. The Tianzhong clan, once flourishing, had met its tragic end. Huern recalled how he had despised his family, and most of all, how he had hated his father. He remembered the cruel words he had spoken in his youth. He had declared that a statue would stand in his place, and if his father ever asked for him, he should be directed to it instead. With those words, he had turned his back on his clan completely. As the eldest son of a martial arts family, his fate should have been different, but he had been effectively sold off to the Sky Ocean Merchant Union through an arranged marriage, and he had not refused. A few years later, the Dabi sect attacked. Huern had watched helplessly as his clan was swallowed by flames. Only then had he realized that, despite all the hatred he bore toward his father, he had loved him just as deeply. In his memory, his younger self smashed his head against the statue that had once mocked his father's authority, bleeding as Yonhua rushed forward, begging him to stop before he killed himself. Back in the present, inside the carriage, Huern spoke with a new resolve. He declared that from now on, he would change. He promised to repair the relationship with his wife and vowed to shed his excess weight. He smiled widely, scratching the back of his head in embarrassment, admitting that he worried how cold his wife might be toward him, but insisted he would serve his family from now on. He reminded Yonhua once more that she was like family to him. Yonhua's eyes softened with relief. She began to reply, telling him that she would continue to stand by his side, but before she could finish, Disaster struck. The body of an old man suddenly crashed through the carriage, slamming into her with such violent force that she was killed instantly. The blow was so powerful that even Heir himself was thrown outside. The old man, bloodied and broken, landed on his feet and braced himself against a tree, coughing blood. He muttered bitterly that his organs were in tatters. Almost immediately, a group of masked men rushed into the scene. One of them lunged at the old man with a blade, but the old man caught it with his bare hand, stopping it from cutting into him. The masked assailant coldly reminded him that he had been warned there was no escape. The old man roared back in fury, demanding to know how they dared betray him. Before he could finish, several more blades stabbed into his body. One of the masked men sneered that this was the end of the almighty demonic master. He mockingly bade him farewell, calling him "Dear Master." The old man's voice grew heavy with rage. He cursed them, swearing vengeance on the Blood Demon Castle, promising that if he failed to grind them down and drink their blood, he would not be worthy of his name as the demonic master. His fury erupted in a surge of red aura that sent the masked men flying. Meanwhile, Heir, injured and groaning on the ground, tried to rise. His eyes caught sight of Yonhwa's lifeless body lying in a pool of blood. Panic overtook him. He stumbled forward, screaming her name, and lifted her into his lap, his tears spilling freely. His anguished cry tore through the night as he cursed his stroke of misfortune. The old man, still barely alive, staggered away but collapsed to his knees. His breath was shallow as he admitted to himself that he needed a new body before his heart stopped. He muttered that he must use the spirit possession technique, though his voice trembled with doubt. Was this where his journey would end? A chilling voice interrupted his despair. Heir, blinded by grief and fury, shouted at the old man. He accused him of dragging Yonhwa into this mess, of fighting here and causing her death. He demanded an answer, his hands shaking as he grabbed the old man by the collar. His voice cracked as he screamed that his family had just been taken from him. The old man's lips moved faintly. He told him he should not. With sudden speed, he struck Heir's pressure point with his left hand. Heir gasped in shock, realizing what had happened as his body went limp. He collapsed to the ground, whispering in disbelief that he could no longer move. The old man walked slowly toward him, his voice rough yet mocking. He told Heir that he should not treat an injured old man so harshly. Heir's inner voice cursed himself. He had known the old man was a martial artist, but in his anger, he had lost control of his temper. The old man sat down beside him and confessed his intentions. He admitted that he had planned to use the spirit possession technique one final time, hoping to seize the body of someone young and talented so he could live longer. But since death was moments away, he had no choice. Even if it were the body of a pig, he would take it. He began the technique. The old man gathered 160 years' worth of martial essence into his left hand, pure chi, condensed into its peak. With his right hand, he summoned the culmination of his soul, his very spirit. He thrust both into Heir's body. A violent red aura shot upward into the sky, shaking the ground. After a few moments, the aura vanished, leaving the old man's body lifeless. Heir's body twitched, then sat upright, shoving the corpse away. He raised his hand, flexing it in disbelief, before a twisted smile crept across his face. His eyes glowed with a sinister light as he whispered that he had succeeded. But suddenly, his expression faltered. His body began to resist. Inside him, two voices clashed. The old man's spirit muttered in frustration that Heir should already have been suppressed by his immense chi and spiritual power. Yet, Heir's own spirit roared back, refusing to yield. He swore he could not die like this. He had to survive. He had to avenge his clan. The two spirits collided violently, battling for control. Heir's spirit began to crumble under the strain. The old man mocked him, saying that although his will was surprising, it was ultimately futile. Heir gasped that his consciousness was fading away. Outside the struggle within, one of the masked men had returned. He approached the possessed body and sneered. He recognized the technique and admitted that the demonic master had indeed lived up to his reputation. The demons of the three heavens had revered him for a reason, but he declared that his parasitic life would end here. He lunged, driving a blade straight into Heir's neck. The possessed body collapsed instantly. When consciousness returned, it was under a sunny sky. A man groaned, clutching his head, muttering that it felt like it was about to split. He opened his eyes slowly, confused about where he was. Looking around the room, he realized he was in an apothecary. His throat burned with thirst, and he grabbed a cup to drink. The liquid was bitter, unmistakably medicine. As he lowered the cup, he noticed his hand. His eyes widened. He stared at it for a long moment, before suddenly shouting loud enough to shake the building, shattering the cup. He looked down at his hands in disbelief, asking what was wrong with them. A young woman rushed into the room, startled by the sound. She called out to him as, "Young master," asking if he was all right, worried that something had broken. The man immediately stood and grabbed her shoulders with urgency. He stared into her face and asked in shock if she was Yeonhwa, demanding to know why she looked younger. Yeonhwa sighed softly and reminded him that he must have had another nightmare. His mind raced. Could this truly be a dream? But when he stepped on the shards of the broken cup, the pain seared through him too vividly. His eyes widened. The pain felt real. Could it be that this was not a dream at all? He rushed outside, despite Yeonhwa's frantic protests that he should not move with a wounded foot. He approached a statue, trembling as he raised his hand toward it. His memory surged violently, his younger self, headbutting that very statue in defiance of his father. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered Yeonhwa's name. He asked her when this statue had been placed. She blinked in confusion, then replied that it had been 5 days ago. His chest heaved as he repeated her words in disbelief. 5 days? He muttered that he would find out for himself. He lowered his head and smashed it into the statue with full force, breaking it apart. Gasps erupted around him as everyone, including Yeonhwa, shouted his name in shock. Blood trickled down his forehead, but his teeth were clenched with fierce determination. This was no dream. Somehow, impossibly, he was back in the past. He realized then that he had 3 years before the day the Tianzhong clan would fall. His voice shook with resolve as he swore to protect his people and his clan at all costs. The man who made this vow was none other than Yong. The Tianzhong clan was a once proud martial clan that had lived near Tianzhong Mountain in Henan for generations. Many households had taken the mountain's name as their own throughout history, but it was the Yong clan that managed to unify them all. Back then, people across Henan called them the Tianzhong Yong clan. Those who remembered those times still spoke of their glory, but those days had long since passed. The clan's reputation had fallen, and no one praised them anymore. Now they were known simply as the Tianzhong clan. Inside the main hall, Yong, the current clan head, sat drinking tea with a weary expression. He sighed heavily and admitted that 30 years had gone by, yet not a single martial expert had risen from their line. After Elder Yong Gosang, once known as the Supreme Dragon of Henan, their clan had become nothing but a shadow of its former glory. Even the people now looked down on them. He confessed with bitterness that it was a truth they could not deny. His wife poured tea into his cup and tried to console him. She said that they should put their hopes in Hwarin, praying that he would recover and someday lead the clan into a better future. Bayang shook his head. He reminded her that she knew how much Hwarin hated him. Everything he had done had been out of consideration, yet his son saw it as nothing but cruelty. He blamed himself, believing it was his fault for remarrying too quickly after his first wife's death. He admitted he had not even properly grieved for her before bringing another woman into the household. His wife gave him a gentle smile and told him that perhaps all they needed was patience, that Hwarin might simply need more time. Biyang frowned and confessed that he had thought the same thing at first, but the rift between them only seemed to grow deeper as the years went by. Just 5 days ago, when he went to see his son, Hwarin had placed a statue in the garden and told him to pretend that the statue was him instead. With a bitter laugh, he apologized to his wife, saying that he was complaining too much. At that moment, Yeonhwa came running toward them in a panic. Her eyes were wet with tears as she cried out for the clan head. Biyang was startled by her sudden appearance and asked why she was in such a hurry. Yeonhwa struggled to catch her breath as she tried to speak, tears streaming down her face. Biyang snapped at her to stop crying and explain clearly what was wrong. Through her sobs, she revealed that young Master Hwarin had hurt himself and had fallen unconscious. Both Biyang and his wife froze in shock at the news. The clan head's eyes widened as he exclaimed in disbelief. Back at Hwarin's quarters, the young man lay unconscious on his bed. Beads of sweat dripped from his forehead as he tossed in the grip of a dream. In his dream, he found himself standing near a beautiful waterfall. A younger version of himself was laughing happily as he splashed in the water, while his real mother sat nearby, watching him with a smile. She called out softly, asking if he liked the cascading rapids of the waterfall that much. Hwarin, as a child, shouted back joyfully that he did. He showed her the koi fish swimming everywhere, then proudly held up a massive fish he had caught. He beamed and cried out for his mother to look at how big it was. But as soon as he turned to her, his expression collapsed. She was no longer sitting upright. She had collapsed to the ground. The scene shifted, and now he was in her room. She lay pale and frail on the bed, her breathing weak. Tears streamed down the boy's face. She reached out to him gently and told him to come closer. She apologized, saying she could not accompany him to the waterfall anymore to catch koi fish. Hwarin buried his face in her chest, sobbing, calling her mom. She stroked him weakly, whispering that she was fine and begging him to stop crying. But suddenly, her voice grew twisted and deep. It ordered him to stop his damn tears, calling him a weakling. Her soft features shifted and twisted into something monstrous. In her place stood a demonic old man, his face filled with cruelty and a sinister smile twisting across his mouth. He declared that he would take Hwarin's head as a trophy. Then, with his sharp teeth bared, he opened his mouth impossibly wide. The boy screamed in terror, his voice echoing as he shouted for help. With a gasp, Hwarin jolted awake from the nightmare. He sat up immediately. As he panted heavily, he glanced around the room, still shaken, and realized where he was. The surroundings were familiar but also strangely foreign. He recognized it as his room from when he had been younger. As his breathing slowed, a thought crept into his mind. If this was truly his old room, then it meant he had really gone back to the past. It was the time when he had hated his father, when he had cut himself off from his family, and when the clan had eventually fallen to ruin. But now, if he truly had returned to this time, then perhaps he could stop all of that from happening. He clenched his lips with determination, vowing that he could change the fate of his father, his family, and the clan since he knew what the future held. Just then, a burning heat surged inside his body. His eyes widened as the sensation spread. Outside, a group of attendants whispered among themselves about what had happened recently. One said that young Master Hwarin had destroyed a statue by headbutting it. Another scoffed, saying that it was impossible since Hwarin had always been frail and bedridden, never even learning martial arts. Yet another swore he had seen it herself. Their murmurs grew anxious, with one insisting that he must have been possessed. Suddenly, the door to Hwarin's quarters slammed open. The women gasped when they saw him trembling inside. One tried to speak, stammering as she called him young master, but her words faltered. Inside, Hwarin clutched his head and stomach as his body twitched uncontrollably. His inner thoughts raced in panic. Something was wrong. His body burned with heat, and the energy surged from his lower dantian like wildfire. His eyes widened in horror as the thought formed in his mind he needed a woman. The realization horrified him. The energy was overwhelming, surging with uncontrollable yang power. He cursed inwardly. This was the demonic old man's energy. It was too much. If he did not do something about it, he would lose control. His body twitched violently, the heat spreading further. He thought desperately that if he did not restrain himself soon, he might do something he would regret. Without another thought, he bolted past the attendants and ran outside. The attendants gasped in shock, exclaiming that it was still freezing cold outside. Their young master was barely clothed and should not be running around like that. If anything happened to him, they would be the ones held responsible. But Hwarin did not stop. He kept running, his body trembling with heat, until he finally reached the bamboo forest. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself forward. If he did nothing, the old man's energy would consume him entirely. He finally arrived at a familiar place, the waterfall. Without hesitation, he leapt into the rushing water. Steam rose instantly from his body as the cold water clashed against the burning heat inside him. Relief spread across his face as he let out a shaky smile. Inwardly, he thanked the heavens. He was saved. But a voice suddenly pierced the air. Hwarin! His eyes widened when he turned. It was his father, Yong, rushing toward him. Father? Hwarin whispered in disbelief. Yong entered the water, his face pale with fear. He grabbed his son and held him tightly, tears streaming down his face. He shouted at him, asking if he had truly wanted to die. He reminded him that even if he hated him, he should not throw his life away like this, not on such a freezing day. His eyes searched Hwarin's forehead desperately, asking if he was all right after injuring himself. For a moment, Hwarin stayed silent. Inside, his heart trembled. He had missed his father more than he could admit, but he could not suddenly act affectionate or everyone would find it strange. For now, he decided, he would simply try to get closer to him naturally, step by step. Slowly, he wrapped his arms tightly around his father. His eyes burned with emotion as his inner voice whispered that he was truly back. If this were a dream, he wished to never wake up. If this was an illusion, he prayed he would never open his eyes. 3 months passed. On a quiet afternoon, Hwarin sat with his younger half-brother, Yong Kijun, on a wooden dock as they fished together. Kijun chuckled and teased that he was going to win their bet. Hwarin laughed along, asking if Kijun had been fishing all his life to be this confident. Inwardly, Hwarin reflected on how different things had become. Over the past 3 months, he had grown much closer to his family. In his previous life, he had never even spoken much to Kijun. He remembered clearly that his younger brother had once trained in the clan's secret martial technique, but later suffered from chi blockage. After that, Kijun had been unable to progress further, and the Tianzhong clan had lost much of its influence. Eventually, they had become nothing more than a branch of the Yuchi clan. At that time, Hwarin had already become a son-in-law of the Sky Ocean Merchant Union, and had been too busy. By the time he learned of it all, it was already too late. Kijun's voice pulled him back from his thoughts. The boy asked if it was really all right for Hwarin to have stopped taking the medicine he had been prescribed. Hwarin replied casually that those medicines were what had made him fat. Kijun tilted his head in confusion. "When were you ever fat?" he asked innocently. Startled, Hwarin stammered and quickly corrected himself, saying that he only meant he might become fat if he kept drinking them. Kijun grinned and showed him the fish he had caught in his basket. He teased that he liked how Hwarin had been lately, especially since he often gave him extra allowances under the excuse of making bets. Then he asked triumphantly if he had won, showing off his full basket, but Hwarin smirked mischievously. With a sudden movement, he threw his own basket high into the air and shouted that he could not lose again. Kijun's jaw dropped in outrage. He yelled that his brother was cheating. Hwarin only laughed and grabbed him with a wide grin, declaring that he had caught an even bigger fish already. Then, with a sudden leap, he pulled Kijun into the lake with him. Both of them splashed into the water as Kijun screamed, while Hwarin burst into laughter. Inside, Hwarin reflected sorrowfully. He had never realized before what a bright and cheerful child Kijun truly was. In his previous life, he had placed too much of a burden on his brother's shoulders. Quietly, he apologized in his heart. Time passed, and Hwarin devoted himself to training. He pushed his body daily, building his strength before beginning his martial training. He often worried about the demonic old man's energy that still lingered within him, but it had yet to cause him trouble again. However, because of the incident where it had once surged uncontrollably, he had developed the habit of meditating beneath the waterfall every morning to stabilize his chi. One day, after completing his meditation, he noticed his younger half-sister Xiaolan approaching with a towel in her hands. Hwarin walked toward her and told her that she did not need to do this for him. She chuckled shyly and replied that she enjoyed it, that she liked being friends with him now. As he looked at her smiling face, Hwarin's heart sank with regret. In his past life, he had treated her cruelly despite her kindness. Xiaolan had always been lively and friendly. She loved attending events like fireworks festivals, and she had often offered to take him with her. But each time, he had rejected her harshly. The memory returned vividly. She had once asked him sweetly if he wanted to go with her to the festival. He had glared at her with cold eyes, cutting her off before she could finish. He had told her that he had no time to waste playing with her, and with a sinister look, he warned her never to ask him again. That had been the last meaningful interaction they ever had. She had gone alone to the festival, where she was murdered. His father had personally investigated her death, but not long after, he too had been assassinated. Now, in the present, as Hwarin pulled on his upper robe, he turned to her and asked if today was not the day of the moon festival she had mentioned. Her eyes widened with joy. She exclaimed that she thought he had forgotten. When he confirmed that he would go with her, she jumped with excitement. Hwarin smiled and added that they should go shopping for her before the event. Xiaolan clapped her hands and cried out happily, urging him to go immediately. As he looked at her cheerful face, Hwarin's heart hardened with determination. This was another chance to live differently. He could not allow the same tragedies to unfold again. If he were to protect Xiaolan, Kijun, his father, and the entire Tianzhong clan, then he needed strength. He needed to become strong enough to shield his family and restore the clan's former glory. Back at the training yard, Hwarin was running laps alongside the other young men of the clan. As his feet struck the ground, he thought about how different his life had become. In the past, he had done nothing but drink medicine in his room and bury himself in books, never stepping outside. But now everything had changed. Ironically, it all seemed to be thanks to the ominous aura of the old man. His body itched to move, his muscles longed to be tested, and he wanted to measure the improvements that had taken root within him. His thoughts were interrupted when his father's voice suddenly called out to him. Turning his head, Hwarin saw Yong standing nearby, smiling warmly, his eyes glistening with pride. "You really have changed," Byung declared, his voice filled with emotion. "My son has truly grown up." Embarrassed by the attention, Hwarin quickly glanced at the other disciples around him and muttered that the others were watching. But Byung ignored the concern, stepped forward, and firmly grabbed his son's shoulder. "And what does that matter?" He laughed loudly for all to hear. "Hwarin, how about you stop merely exercising and officially begin to learn the martial arts of our family?" Hwarin paused for a moment before nodding. He admitted that he had been thinking of the same thing. Byung's face lit up with joy. "Really? Then I will arrange for an instructor for you immediately," he exclaimed. Hwarin hesitated, however, and after a moment confessed that he already had someone in mind. This piqued his father's curiosity, but before he could ask further, Solon suddenly ran toward them. With a bright smile, she threw herself into her brother's arms. Her father, half amused and half jealous, scolded her playfully. "So now you only look for your brother and ignore your father?" Solon laughed and spun in a circle, showing off the new clothes she wore. "Brother picked out these clothes for me. How do I look, father? Aren't they pretty?" Byung sighed and admitted helplessly that he could not argue with that. Solon chuckled and told him sweetly that she loved him. The sound of laughter filled the yard, and Hwarin stood there quietly, smiling warmly at the scene. Yet, in his heart, he reminded himself that just because his body had changed did not mean he could protect the ones he loved. To shield them, he needed real strength. He needed martial arts. Elsewhere, in a quiet and worn training ground, a graceful figure was practicing. A fine lady moved with elegance as her sword cut smoothly through the air, each strike flowing like water. When she noticed someone approach, she paused and turned. "What brings you to this place, young Master Yong?" she asked coolly. This fine shit was Mo Byung, known as the Dragon Flower Sword. Hwarin greeted her with a smile, admitting that it had been a long time since they had spoken. He explained that he had something to ask of her. His tone was awkward, as if uncertain how to begin. Byung studied him carefully. She thought to herself that the rumors about his recovery must be true. She had never spoken to this twisted young man before, and she could not imagine what kind of request he might bring. When she asked him directly what he meant, Hwarin surprised her. Bowing deeply and speaking with a firm voice, he declared, "I wish to learn your sword skills. Please take me in as your disciple." Byung froze in shock. She had heard whispers that he had changed in recent months, and though he did seem different, she wondered whether a man could truly transform so easily. Many endured difficult lives yet remained upright, while Hwarin had once wallowed in hatred, cutting off his ties to both family and clan. After a long pause, she turned away and refused him. Hwarin was stunned. He quickly asked her for the reason. Byung explained calmly that she was too busy investigating the stagnation of the Tianzhong clan's secret arts to take on a disciple. As she walked away, she apologized silently in her heart. She did not believe people could change so suddenly. Hwarin's chest tightened at her rejection. He thought bitterly that she must still consider him pathetic. In the past, Mo Byung had rarely interacted with others, and even within the clan, not many understood her true skill. Yet Hwarin, who had lived that future once before, knew her strength better than anyone. The depth of her martial ability far exceeded anyone else in the clan. In desperation, he fell to his knees before her. Byung spun back and shouted furiously, demanding to know why the eldest son of the clan would abase himself so over such a trivial matter. But Hwarin murmured quietly at first, then raised his voice. "No, this is not an insignificant matter to me." He thought back on the past he had lived. Mo Byung had been the one who contributed the most in the battle against the Dabi sect. For her valor, she was given the title Dragon Blood Flower, a name not meant for a woman, but she had accepted it and fought on. She gave her all to rebuild the Tianzhong clan, only to die a mysterious death. She had sacrificed her life for the clan. Hwarin clenched his fists in resolve. He swore that he would not allow her to meet the same fate again. He would protect her, and he would protect his clan. Byung gazed at him carefully. His demeanor was not the same as before. Could it be that he truly had turned over a new leaf? At last she spoke, saying that she would accept his request but only under one condition. Huaren's heart leapt as she explained. If he could touch her even once during a spar, she would accept him as her disciple. She would not use qi nor the martial arts of the clan, but even then, she was certain he would never succeed. Huaren hesitated, but his determination rose. He accepted the challenge. Moments later, he lay defeated on the ground, unable to even graze her hair. He thought to himself in disbelief that the gap was that enormous. Yong began to walk away, declaring that she had won and that she would take her leave. But Huaren, gritting his teeth, could not accept defeat. With a roar, he lunged at her again, shouting that their duel was not over. She easily deflected him, striking him down each time he tried to rise. With each word he spoke, she struck him again, reminding him of his weakness. At last, he collapsed fully, though he still clutched his sword. She looked down at him and admitted that his effort was commendable. As she turned to leave, something unexpected surged within him. A sudden aura flared from his body, crimson and wild. Yong stopped instantly, startled. "Red aura?" she gasped. "That is not the martial art of the Tianzhong clan. Just what is that?" Alarmed, she shouted for him to come back to his senses, but Huaren did not respond. In a blink, he was standing directly in front of her, his wooden sword raised for another strike. She barely managed to dodge, her eyes widening in shock. His speed had grown terrifying. Again he struck, and again she evaded, but the relentless pressure forced her back toward the wall. Realizing the danger, she decided she had no choice but to counter him seriously. She drew her blade and began to summon her technique. She prepared to unleash the first form of the Soaring Dragon Emperor sword, but before she could strike, Huaren's wooden sword brushed against her hair. Yong froze in disbelief. Huaren, grinning weakly through exhaustion, declared, "I touched you. Dragonflower sword." "No, Master Mo Yong." Then he collapsed unconscious at her feet. Yong stood stunned, unable to believe what had just occurred. She turned toward the wall behind her, where she saw the damage his wooden sword had left. The wall was smashed and broken by sheer force. Her eyes widened further as she whispered in shock, "Just what was that?" A few days passed, and Huaren continued to practice his sword techniques with relentless focus. His body glistened with sweat, each breath heavy as he swung the blade through the air. From a short distance away, Mo Yong silently observed him. Her sharp eyes traced every movement, and in her heart, she marveled at what she saw. She thought that she had not expected the young master to possess this much talent. In just a few days, he had already learned the forms of the Soaring Dragon Emperor sword and the Azure Bamboo sword. Once, he had seemed to have no martial talent at all, yet now he handled the forms with startling ease. When Huaren finally lowered his weapon, gasping for breath, he turned to her and asked eagerly how he had done. Yong's tone remained firm as she answered that although he had not yet awakened to the true secrets of the techniques, he was already using both swords without any visible flaw. Considering how little time he had been practicing, his achievement was excellent. Huaren chuckled lightly, brushing off her words and saying that she praised him too much. Her gaze suddenly sharpened, however, and she fixed him with a serious look. She remarked that his progress was unbelievable, that she could hardly reconcile the image of him now with the sickly young master who had once been bedridden. His speed in learning was remarkable, and she admitted bluntly that he was incredible. Then her expression darkened as she recalled the red aura she had seen from him before. Huaren scratched the back of his head awkwardly and insisted once again that he did not remember what had happened. He explained that he had suffered so many blows from her during their spar that he could not recall anything clearly. He added playfully that only she would treat the eldest son of the clan so harshly with her dragonflower sword. But Mo Yong did not laugh. She remained stern and silent for a long moment before finally turning away. She told him that since he refused to answer, she would not pry further. However, she reminded him that she was still responsible as one who served the Tianzhong clan, and for that reason, she would observe every moment of his life. Huaren smiled awkwardly and admitted that it sounded a little frightening. That night, alone in his dimly lit chamber, Huaren sat at his desk with martial arts manuals spread before him. His candlelight flickered as he pored over every word, his mind racing with thoughts. After wielding both the Soaring Dragon Emperor sword and the Azure Bamboo sword, he could feel it clearly. The martial arts of the Tianzhong clan were incomplete. He reasoned that it was inevitable, since their roots had not been purely orthodox. In his mind, he traced the origins of their clan's art. Long ago, the progenitor of the Tianzhong clan had been a wandering martial artist seeking justice in Henan. He had obtained the demonic arts from the master of the hidden saint cult, which was neither fully orthodox nor truly demonic. Though he had studied demonic techniques, the progenitor had worked tirelessly to reshape them, transforming the arts into the soaring dragon sword and the azure bamboo sword while striving to remain on the path of justice. The power of those arts had been reduced in the process, yet they still produced the greatest swordsman in Henan at that time. But the truth remained. Using demonic martial arts alongside orthodox cultivation left the system incomplete. The progenitor had reached a peak, but not the supreme peak. To prevent unrest, he had hidden the true origins of the martial arts, and over the ages, that truth had been buried. But now it resurfaced, casting its shadow over the Tianzhong clan. The realization thrilled Huaren. He smirked widely, clenched his fists, and thought to himself that he alone could complete these unstable and incomplete martial arts. Only he, someone who had experienced the future, possessed the knowledge to do so. The next day, Huaren sat with his father and stepmother in the garden, sharing tea as sunlight filtered through the trees. Calmly, he announced his intention to visit the Jaegal clan. His father looked up in mild surprise and asked what business he had there. Huaren explained that since he had recovered his health by learning martial arts, he believed it was proper to visit the Jaegal clan and pay his respects, especially as someone who had been arranged to marry one of their daughters even before his birth. Yong leaned back with a thoughtful sigh. He agreed, remarking that time truly flew quickly. It had been decided long ago that Huaren would wed into the Jaegal clan. He recalled that the daughter's name was Jaegal Yong. When Huaren confirmed it, Biyang smiled warmly, saying that he had been close friends with Jaegal Yugyol and that his friend would be delighted to see Huaren. He had heard that Yong was an incredible beauty. Then he asked his son when he intended to leave. Before Huaren could answer, his stepmother objected. She insisted that he had only just recovered, and that it would be better for him to rest longer. Biyang, however, laughed heartily and countered that his son was of age now. He explained that traveling and meeting friends were part of a young man's life, recalling how he himself had met Jaegal Yugyol at around the same age. Reluctantly, his wife relented, though she added sternly that Huaren must be careful. The journey would take more than a month, and so he would need a reliable bodyguard. A few days later, Huaren met again with Mo Biyang, who was looking at him with a faintly irritated expression. He greeted her happily, but his curiosity rose when he noticed the two unfamiliar men standing behind her. He asked who they were. The two men approached slowly, circling him as they examined his physique. One of them muttered in surprise, while the other commented that, though his frame was not large, his body was flexible. They remarked together that the rumors of him practicing martial arts were true, and that he truly seemed different from before. Huaren quickly recognized them as the rising ghost blades, Hongwook and Namwook. He bowed slightly and said it was an honor to meet them. One of the men laughed and assured him cheerfully that he and the dragon flower sword would do everything in their power to protect him. The other tilted his head and noted that Huaren's body had potential for more strength. Huaren thought privately that they looked like muscleheads, but he also knew their skill was real. The rising ghost blades specialized in the technique known as Ghost Blade, and his father had clearly gone to great effort to select them as his protectors. When the time came to plan their departure, Huaren gathered them and declared that he would be the one to designate their path. He asked only that they follow without question. Jungwook met his eyes for a long moment before nodding firmly and answering that, of course, he would obey. With their agreement sealed, Huaren prepared to leave. Before departing, he went to say farewell to his family. Solon burst into tears as she clung to him, asking if he truly needed to go. He gently patted her head and promised that when he returned, he would take her to the festival. She asked if he meant it, and he smiled, assuring her that he did. He then turned to Kijong, gripped his shoulder, and told him to protect Seolan and the rest of the family in his absence. Kijong looked up at him in surprise, thinking that his brother seemed taller than ever before, then answered with determination that he would guard their family with his life. Finally, Huaren bowed to his parents, saying his farewell and preparing to mount his horse. Just as he was about to depart, a cry rang out. Someone was running toward him, breathless, shouting for him to wait. Huaren turned to see Yunhua rushing forward. She skidded to a stop, panting, and begged him to let her come with him. For a moment, Huaren paused in silence. Yong quickly interjected, advising him to refuse and insisting that the journey was far too dangerous for a girl. But Hwarin raised a hand to stop him. He stepped down from his horse and walked toward Yonhwa. When he reached her, he extended his hand. Yonhwa flinched, bracing as if expecting a blow, and whispered an apology. Instead, Hwarin drew her into a tight embrace. She gasped in surprise, her eyes wide. He spoke softly to her, saying that she had always wished to be by his side and that he was deeply grateful for her presence. But, he explained, the path he was taking was extremely dangerous, and at present, he did not yet have the strength to protect her if she accompanied him. He confessed that he did not want to place her in harm's way, because she was his beloved family. He asked her to stay behind with his parents, Kijong and Seolan, and to wait for his return. Tears welled in Yeonhwa's eyes, but she smiled as she promised that she would. At last, Hwarin mounted his horse again and set off with his companions. As they rode away, he thought to himself that when he returned to the Tianzhong clan, much would have changed. He vowed to protect his family and prevent the fall of his clan, and all of it would begin with completing the incomplete martial arts. He admitted inwardly that visiting the Jaegal clan was merely an excuse. Their true destination lay beyond. The Jaegal clan was close to Wudang Mountain, and it was there, on that sacred peak, that he believed the secret to perfecting the martial arts of the Tianzhong clan awaited. He clenched the reins tightly and whispered in his heart. They would be heading to Wudang. Days later, Hwarin lay in the shallow waters of a stream, his eyes fixed on the vast and beautiful sky above. The stillness of the scene felt strange to him, almost unsettling. In a quiet murmur, he admitted to himself that this place was unusual. Slowly, he rose to his feet and began to walk through the rippling current, until he noticed a broken wooden sign lying half buried in the water. He picked it up and brushed away the dirt. His expression hardened as his gaze froze on the letters carved into the wood. It bore the name of the Tianzhong clan. A sharp chill seized him. In the next moment, the calm stream dissolved into a horrific vision. The Tianzhong clan appeared before his eyes, engulfed in flames. The night sky glowed crimson. Buildings collapsed into fire, and the air reeked of smoke and ash. Hwarin dropped the wooden sign in shock as his heart began to pound violently in his chest. He stumbled forward and shouted in disbelief. "No, no!" His cries echoed as he ran frantically through the burning ruins, calling out as though searching for survivors. Then, a deep, chilling voice cut through the chaos. The words struck him like a hammer. Hwarin froze instantly. The voice was unmistakable. It was the old demonic man, the very one who had possessed his body in his past life before he regressed. His presence made every nerve in Hwarin's body tremble. The old man's tone was filled with scorn. He declared that even after receiving the greatest possible opportunity, one that defied the heavens themselves, Hwarin still wasted his time on childish pursuits. He said nothing could be changed and demanded that Hwarin hand over his body. Fear gripped him, and Hwarin stammered in disbelief. He recognized the voice and asked how the old man had returned. Before the demonic figure could finish his command, the vision shattered like glass. A sharp slash interrupted his thoughts, dragging him back into reality. Mo Byung's voice cut through the haze as she demanded to know what he had been thinking about during their spar. Startled, Hwarin pulled back, his eyes wide as he realized he had been lost in a trance. He admitted in a quiet voice that he surrendered. Mo Byung studied him carefully. She told him that he seemed unable to focus again and asked whether he was feeling unwell. Hwarin looked away and admitted softly that he was fine, but explained that his sleep had been disturbed over the past few days. Nearby, Jungwook and Namwook were training with heavy stones, their bodies straining with effort. Between breaths, Jungwook glanced toward Hwarin and suggested that if the young master did not feel well, he could join them in their training. He explained that the exercises, called the matching river and the lifting thrust flow, were meant to build strength. Namwook added instructions while panting, reminding his brother to utilize his side muscles and ensure the stones stayed perpendicular as they lifted. Watching them, Hwarin let out a nervous laugh and shook his head. He told them perhaps next time, but then his expression grew serious. He announced that he had something important to tell them about their journey. Later, as they rode along a dirt road on horseback, Hwarin revealed his plan. He explained that before heading to the Jaegal clan, he wanted to stop at Mount Seven Sages. Jungwook turned in surprise and repeated the name of the mountain. Hwarin elaborated, saying he had read a book written by a renowned herbalist. According to the text, there was a part of Mount Seven Sages where 100-year-old ginseng could be found. The book also mentioned the existence of a rare treasure called monkey wine, which was nearly impossible to find elsewhere in the Jianghu. At the mention of monkey wine, Jungwook and Namwook's mouths watered. They repeated the words dreamily, as if already tasting it. Hwarin smirked and teased them. He remarked that he had heard of their reputation, saying the two of them were known as the two rising drunken ghosts because of their love for liquor. Flustered, Jungwook cleared his throat and attempted to respond, insisting they supported the journey. But before he could finish, Mo Byung interrupted sharply. Her tone was stern, as she reminded Hwarin that Mount Seven Sages lay near the territories of demonic sects. For an orthodox clan like the Tianzhong to go there, she warned, could invite disaster. Hwarin countered her calmly. He asked how anyone would know they belonged to the Tianzhong clan. If they were caught, he reasoned, they could claim to be from some other group. Mo Byung grew furious. She demanded to know how the heir of the Tianzhong clan could speak so lightly of such dishonor. She argued that the pride of their clan was not something to be discarded. But Hwarin cut her off coldly. He asked if pride was really so important when survival was at stake. If a great enemy demanded his origin, he said, he would not hesitate to claim allegiance to a demonic sect if it meant surviving. Jungwook stepped in and supported Hwarin's reasoning. He argued that there was no reason for an orthodox sect to fear demonic ones and insisted that following the young master's judgment was the wiser choice. Mo Byung accused them of being motivated only by their eagerness for monkey wine. Hwarin, exaggerating his sincerity, placed a hand on his chest. He claimed his true intention was to bring ginseng back for his parents, confessing he had caused them much trouble in the past and wished to make amends. Mo Byung faltered at his words, her anger softening. After a pause, she reluctantly agreed. If he insisted, she said, then they would head to Mount Seven Sages. Relieved, Hwarin thanked them all and told the group they should make preparations at a nearby inn. But deep inside, his lips twisted into a sly grin. He admitted to himself that he had lied. There was no ginseng or monkey wine waiting at Mount Seven Sages. What truly awaited was something far more valuable, the demonic poison stone flower. He recalled its nature clearly. There were places where poisonous insects gathered to die when their time came. Over centuries, their venom pooled and hardened into a crystal of poison. When a seed fell upon such a crystal, it sprouted into a flower imbued with venom and demonic energy. This was the demonic poison stone flower, and according to what he knew, it was hidden somewhere within Mount Seven Sages. That evening, at the inn, rumors spread among martial artists. From a nearby table, Hwarin overheard a group whispering about demonic masters gathering near Mount Seven Sages. One man leaned closer to his companions and revealed in a hushed voice that a rare medicine had been discovered there. Its name was the demonic poisonstone flower. Hwarin stiffened in shock. His mind burned with frustration. How could the whole world already know of it? Later that night, as they drank together, Mo Byung spoke gravely. She reminded Hwarin that he must have heard the rumors of demonic masters converging on Mount Seven Sages because of the flower. She insisted that it was too dangerous to head there now. Hwarin admitted silently that she was right. The demonic sects would surely fight fiercely for it. But he reassured himself that he did not need to join their struggle. He only needed to defeat Gochok, who would be the last to claim the flower. In his previous life, Gochok had advanced from first rate to the peak within half a year. The demonic poisonstone flower. It will undoubtedly be an ingredient optimized for his martial arts. The martial arts of Tianzhong are ultimately demonic arts. He raised his cup and declared firmly that nothing had changed. They would still head to Mount Seven Sages. Mo Byung sprang to her feet in disbelief. She asked if he had not heard that the demonic sects were already gathering there. Hwarin replied calmly that Mount Seven Sages was one of the routes to the Jaegul clan. Since the Jaegul clan would surely be involved, he argued, it might not be a bad idea to meet them there. Mo Byung reluctantly agreed, but with one condition. If they encountered martial artists stronger than themselves, they must evade immediately. Hwarin nodded and assured her that he would avoid dangerous confrontations. He glanced toward Jungwook and Namwook, only to find the two Ghostblades already passed out drunk at the table. Shaking his head, he repeated his promise to stay cautious. A few days later, they finally arrived at Mount Seven Sages and checked into a nearby inn. Hwarin told his companions that they would stay there for the time being. Secretly, he admitted to himself that the mountain surroundings were like a gallery of chaos. Though he was still too weak to enter recklessly, he smiled darkly, reminding himself that whoever had the last laugh would be the true victor. Earlier that day, he had given instructions to his group. He told them to investigate inns and taverns run by the Serpent Dragon sect and to find ones with few customers but many horses. He reasoned that Gochok, as the young sect leader, would not move alone. He would bring his men, and for that, they would need horses and stables. Even if Gochok obtained the flower, he would not transport it immediately. He would first stop at an inn to secure it, and it was highly likely the inn would be managed by his sect. If such a place could be identified, Hwoaran thought, they could intercept Gochok before the flower was hidden away. In the past, Gochok had been the one to claim it, but this time, Hwoaran intended to take it for himself. Later that day, Hwoaran and Jungwook stood on a balcony, watching the street below. Namwook approached and asked what they were observing. Jungwook pointed at a figure in the crowd and told him that it was none other than Gochok, the young sect leader of the Serpent Dragon sect. Hwoaran's eyes widened. He thought to himself that Gochok should already be at Mount Seven Sages fighting for the flower. Why was he here instead? In the distance, one of Gochok's men leaned close and whispered something into his ear. Hwoaran strained to listen but could not make out the words. He cursed in irritation. Suddenly, Gochok's eyes widened, and his voice thundered across the street. He barked orders to his men, demanding that the Serpent Dragon 8 swords and the Serpent Dragon slashers be gathered immediately to give chase. Even Jungwook was startled by his commanding tone. He explained to Hwoaran that those were the two strongest forces of the Serpent Dragon sect. Gochok had shouted with such force that even he had heard it clearly. Hwoaran's expression narrowed. If something urgent had just occurred, it meant there might be new opportunities. The chances of him obtaining the demonic poison stone flower had just increased. With calm determination, he told his companions to prepare, declaring that they would follow. Mo Byong appeared at once, her face filled with protest. She demanded to know if he truly intended to chase the demonic sects, reminding him it was far too dangerous. She scolded him for involving himself in increasingly perilous situations, but Hwoaran's voice remained steady. He told her that soon the Jianghu would face great upheaval, and to survive within that chaos, they would need to become stronger. The demonic poison stone flower, he insisted. Mo Byong cut him off sharply. She argued that the Jianghu was at peace, and that they were not so weak as to rely on poisonous herbs for security. Hwoaran's voice turned cold. He declared that she was wrong. They were weak. He asked if she truly lacked desire for the flower, and answered for her. Of course not. No martial artist could resist such a treasure. The truth was that they were simply too weak to participate in the struggle openly. He then spoke of his dream. He vowed to obtain the flower, grow stronger, and protect their clan from outside threats. Stepping closer, he fixed her with a piercing gaze. If she truly believed in him, the heir of their clan, then she should follow his command. Mo Byong stepped back, shocked by the determination in his voice. She admitted silently that the young master, who once could barely manage himself, now stood before her with a resolve she had never seen. She questioned whether she had failed to see him as a proper adult until this moment. Jungwook suddenly burst into laughter, clapping with delight. He admitted that he never knew their clan heir carried such a bold pledge in his heart. Both Jungwook and Namwook bowed respectfully, pledging themselves to his leadership. They introduced themselves formally as the two rising ghost blades and swore to follow the command of their young clan leader. After a long pause, Mo Byong lowered her head as well. She told Hwoaran she would also follow his will, though she warned him gravely that the Jianghu was not a place to be taken lightly. Hwoaran nodded calmly and told them to set forth. Inside, however, his thoughts darkened. He reassured her silently, for in the entire Jianghu, no one understood its cruelty better than him. After all, he had already lived through it once. Hwoaran and his companions trailed behind the Serpent Dragon sect, keeping a cautious distance. As they moved through the cover of the forest, Hwoaran observed the enemy with narrowed eyes, thinking to himself that he had not expected so many of their members to be gathered here. While crouching in the bushes, Mo Byong whispered to him with concern. She pointed out the movement of the Serpent Dragon sect, and Hwoaran quietly replied that Gochok and his men appeared to be forming the inescapable net formation. Jungwook's eyes widened with alarm as he muttered the name of the formation, while Namwook nervously suggested that they should leave before it was too late. Hwoaran, however, shook his head. He explained that the main squad of the Serpent Dragon sect had not yet made their move, and that they would likely act only once they spotted someone suspicious or the person carrying the miracle medicine. For now, they needed to remain patient and wait for the right timing. Moments later, a loud commotion erupted in the distance where the Serpent Dragon sect was stationed. Huaren listened carefully and concluded that the enemy had found the person carrying the miracle medicine. He quickly instructed his group to move closer to the riverbank instead. When Namwook asked why, Huaren explained that a person on the run would more likely escape toward the water than into the dense forest. He also pointed out that the shouting from the Serpent Dragon sect had ceased, which meant they were closing in on their target. He reminded the others to be as stealthy as possible from this point onward. Not long after, a man appeared at the opening of the river. He stumbled forward weakly, gasping for air and crying out for help in a broken voice. Before he could escape, a surge of purple aura materialized out of nowhere and struck him down instantly, killing him on the spot. The explosion that followed shook the ground, and when the dust finally dispersed, a single figure was revealed. Standing in the middle of the riverbank was a man shrouded in a menacing purple aura. In his hand, he clutched the demonic poison stone flower, its sinister glow feeding into his already dreadful presence. Yong's face paled as she recognized him immediately. She whispered in shock that this man was none other than the flying demonic blood lion. At her words, fear and unease rippled through the group. Huaren studied the man closely and remarked that his aura was ominous, then asked Yong if she knew more about him. Jungwook answered instead, explaining that among the martial artists of the demonic world, the flying demonic blood lion was a notorious figure and one of the most feared. Huaren, however, noticed something else. He pointed out that the man's state did not seem stable, and then his eyes widened as he realized what the man was holding. The demonic poison stone flower was in his possession. Their thoughts were interrupted when the Serpent Dragon sect arrived swiftly and surrounded the flying demonic blood lion in tight formation. Gochok stepped forward to confront him, his voice ringing with accusation as he declared that the blood lion had killed the most elite warriors of their sect. He admitted that he never imagined he would be forced to corner such a figure, but now that moment had come. The flying demonic blood lion only laughed mockingly. He ridiculed them, saying he had not expected to be cornered by weaklings and that if not for interference from the Tang clan, he would have ripped them apart with ease. In response, Gochok reached into his pocket and revealed a small weapon. He asked if the blood lion recognized it, announcing it to be the 1,000-needle downpour. At the sight of it, the blood lion's expression changed to shock as he demanded to know how Gochok had obtained such a weapon. Gochok smirked and explained that they had spent a considerable fortune to acquire it, and warned him not to think they only had one. In perfect unison, every man in the Serpent Dragon sect pulled out the same weapon. The blood lion's shock quickly twisted into anger. He snarled that such inferior weapons could never bring him down, and his arms burst with a violent, relentless energy. Gochok gave the order without hesitation, commanding his men to fire. The air erupted in a deafening series of explosions as the 1,000-needle downpour unleashed its deadly rain. Countless sharp projectiles poured down toward the flying demonic blood lion. In response, the blood lion roared, channeling his chi into a massive barrier of purple aura that spread out to engulf nearly the entire riverbank. From their hiding place, Huaren's eyes widened in disbelief. His thoughts raced as he wondered if it could truly be possible that the blood lion possessed such overwhelming strength. The Serpent Dragon sect's attack clashed against the barrier, but the blood lion deflected every strike. A shockwave erupted, forcing even Gochok to brace himself as he cried out in disbelief, demanding how his opponent still possessed so much chi. The blood lion then leapt high into the air, looking down at them with wild eyes as he burst into manic laughter. He mocked the Serpent Dragon sect, shouting that they were nothing compared to him. Grinding his teeth, Gochok roared an order for the second Serpent Dragon squad to fire. Once again, the 1,000-needle downpour was unleashed, this time targeting the blood lion while he was still suspended mid-air. The projectiles struck him directly, and his body plummeted down into the river below. One of the Serpent Dragon sect members shouted triumphantly that the flying demonic blood lion had fallen. Without wasting time, Gochok barked further commands. He ordered the 8th sword of the Serpent Dragon and the Serpent Dragon bladesman to finish him off and retrieve the miracle medicine. The warriors surged toward the river where the blood lion had landed, yet the man rose again despite multiple needles piercing him. He smirked defiantly. With a chilling laugh, he declared that they would never find the miracle medicine. He roared at them to come, vowing to drag them all down to hell with him. What followed was a brutal slaughter. The flying demonic blood lion faced the Serpent Dragon sect's forces alone, tearing through them with savagery as they swarmed him. From a distance, Hwarin and his group watched in grim silence. Mo Byong thought to herself that she had never witnessed such a horrific bloodbath before. She turned her gaze to the young master and wondered how, despite his inexperience in the Jianghu, he could remain so calm while witnessing such carnage. Eventually, the tide turned. The blood lion was struck repeatedly until his body could no longer endure. With countless arrows embedded in him and the sword lodged deep in his back, his blood spilled freely into the river, turning the waters red. His strength failing, he staggered before finally collapsing into the crimson-stained river. His lifeless body drifted as Gochok shouted at his men to search him immediately. The search party quickly responded in panic, stammering that the miracle medicine was not on his body. Gochok, furious, yelled for them to search again. He was certain they had been close enough during the chase that the blood lion would not have had the chance to hide it anywhere. He ordered them to look around with greater urgency. Meanwhile, Hwarin signaled his companions to follow him as he explained his deduction. He reasoned that the miracle medicine was not on the blood lion's corpse, because it had likely been sent down the stream. He reminded them that earlier, the blood lion had formed a water barrier. While the barrier may have blocked the incoming weapons, it also blinded him to his enemies. Normally, someone of his skill should have used Qinggong to dodge the attacks instead. Hwarin concluded that the only reason the blood lion had chosen that tactic was so he could release the miracle medicine into the current, ensuring that he could retrieve it later. Before they could discuss further, a loud noise echoed nearby. Hwarin urged his companions to move quickly, warning that the serpent dragon sect would soon realize the same conclusion. At the end of the river, Hwarin and his group finally arrived. There, floating in the water, was the very flower they had been searching for. Hwarin immediately reached for it, exclaiming that it was indeed the demonic poison stone flower. Before storing it away, he pulled out a vial of poison from his pocket, along with a small container. Searching the area, he plucked an ordinary flower and poured the poison over it. Before their eyes, the flower transformed, taking on the exact appearance of the demonic poison stone flower. Mo Byong stared at him in shock and remarked that it was not proper for an orthodox martial artist to carry poison. Hwarin calmly explained that poison was a useful tool. He placed the fake flower inside the container and said that while it might not fool the demonic sects for long, it would deceive them long enough for the group to escape with the real one. Jungwook muttered in amazement, remarking that obtaining the flower had been far too easy. He compared their fortune to the men who had just fought with their lives for it, admitting that he never imagined they would be the ones to secure it by simply trailing behind. Hwarin only smiled faintly and said that they had merely been lucky before instructing the group to leave quickly. Just as he tightened his grip around the container, it suddenly vanished from his hand. The group froze in shock as a familiar figure appeared before them. The flying demonic blood lion, his body battered and drenched in blood, stood tall once again. His chilling voice echoed as he declared that the demonic poison stone flower belonged to him. Mo Byong suddenly rushed toward Hwarin, her voice breaking with panic as she called out for the young clan leader. Hwarin, however, stood frozen in shock. His mind raced as he realized that the man before them was truly the flying demonic blood lion. His thoughts stammered in disbelief, for the serpent dragon sect should have already finished him. Before he could react further, the blood lion lunged without warning, striking Hwarin with such force that he was sent flying through the air. The blood lion caught the container in his hand, crushing it instantly and leaving only the flower intact. His voice thundered with rage as he shouted at Hwarin and his companions, calling them greedy rats who did not know their place. He growled that he had intended to take his time to absorb the flower properly, but circumstances had forced him to burn away his life as true Qi. Since he no longer had that luxury, he declared he would rip apart every human before him and replenish his energy with their blood. As he devoured the demonic poison stone flower in one swift motion, a menacing and relentless aura exploded from his body, pressing down on everyone present. Mo Byong froze where she stood. Her entire body trembled, and her clothes were soaked in cold sweat. Her thoughts screamed in terror as she admitted to herself that this was the first time she had ever faced an opponent so overwhelmingly powerful. At this rate, she was certain that she would die here. At that moment, Namwook and Jungwook stepped forward calmly, their demeanor entirely different from hers. Namwook spoke first, saying that ever since his birth, he had always acted before thinking, which was how he had earned the title of Ghostblade. Together, the brothers announced themselves as the two rising Ghostblades, warriors of the Tianzhong clan, and vowed to protect their young leader, even if it meant standing against the demonic monster before them. They declared their intent to defeat the flying demonic blood lion. Mo Byung cried out, her voice cracking as she tried to stop them. She pleaded that he was far too strong and warned that they would surely die if they tried. Jung-wook cut her off, his tone sharp and steady. He told her to do what needed to be done, calling her by her title, the Dragon Flower Sword. Namwook turned to her with a faint smirk and reminded her that their enemy had just consumed poison. Her eyes widened as the memory struck her. She thought back to what Hwarin had done earlier, when he had secretly swapped the real flower with another that had been laced with poison. The realization strengthened her trembling resolve. Namwook went on to explain that not only was the blood lion gravely wounded, but he had also burned away his life energy as true chi, and now he had poisoned himself on top of that. If they could simply stall him for long enough, they might have a chance. Jung-wook shouted that they would attack first, and the two brothers charged forward with their blades drawn. The blood lion's eyes gleamed with cruel admiration. He admitted that he respected them for not running away, but sneered that their courage was meaningless. With a sudden movement, his arms stretched outward and his aura surged, seizing both Jung-wook and Namwook in its grip. Before the deadly force could crush them, a yellow aura surged in the middle of the battlefield, expanding into the form of a barrier. The blood lion was forced backward by the sudden pressure. Mo Byung had stepped in, her sword flashing as she invoked her technique. Her voice rang as she called out the name of her attack, the Soaring Dragon Emperor Sword. Without pause, she followed it with another strike, unleashing the Heavenly Lightning Ascension. Her blade pierced into the blood lion's left arm, drawing a roar of agony from him. The demonic warrior leapt back to gain distance, but blood gushed from his mouth as he coughed violently. His thoughts turned inward in confusion. He realized that the sensation coursing through his body was poison. He wondered if the Tang clan's old crone had gotten to him, but quickly dismissed the thought. The Tang clan's poison would have already melted his organs by now. This meant the source was different. His eyes narrowed in fury as he stared at Mo Byung and the two ghost blades. Clenching his teeth, he bellowed in rage, demanding how they dared trick him in such a way. His words turned into a threat as he vowed to grind their bones into dust. His declaration was cut short by another violent cough. From a distance, Mo Byung steadied her breath and thought carefully. Ghostblade had been right, she realized. The blood lion was at his absolute limit. If they could just endure a little longer, victory might come. Suddenly, the blood lion erupted into loud, bitter laughter. For a moment, his laughter echoed with strength, but it soon faded into a broken rasp. He muttered aloud, wondering if this truly was to be his grave. He clutched his head with both hands, snarling that it could not be. It was unthinkable that he would fall not to the Tang clan, nor to the weaklings of the Serpent Dragon sect, but to a group of nameless nobodies. His sinister gaze lifted again, and he fixated on them with hatred. He hissed that the one he had sent flying earlier must have been holding the real demonic poison stone flower. If so, then he would tear open that person's stomach and drink the contents to seize the power for himself. His body trembled with violent energy as he began to advance slowly. His pace quickened into a sudden leap as he hurled himself forward. His target was Namwook, and he struck without hesitation. Mo Byung tried to intercept, her sword flashing again, but the blood lion shifted his position using his deadly technique, the shifting step. In an instant, he vanished from her path and reappeared in front of Jung-wook. Jung-wook had no time to react before the blood lion's fist slammed into his face, sending him crashing through the air. With Jung-wook down, the blood lion turned his bloodthirsty focus toward Mo Byung and charged at her. Fear consumed her as her body froze. Her thoughts screamed in despair that she could not dodge in time. Just as his hand reached for her, a flash of steel tore through the air. Hwarin appeared out of nowhere, his blade moving faster than the eye could follow. In a single decisive strike, he cut clean through the blood lion's left arm. Earlier, after the flying demonic blood lion struck him down, Hwarin lay slumped against a tree that had splintered from the impact of his body. He coughed blood heavily, his breath ragged, his limbs refusing to move. His mind reeled at the thought that the blood lion had gone so far as to expend his very life essence as true chi just to pursue him. He cursed inwardly, desperate to move, but found that his broken and battered body would not obey. His left leg was dislocated, and every groan he forced out was filled with pain. He admitted to himself that no one in all of Jianghu understood the price of such power better than he did. Staring up at the sky with blood running from the corner of his mouth, He muttered bitterly to himself. He said that he had acted as if he understood everything, only to find himself broken and helpless in this moment. As his head tilted back, he noticed warm liquid dripping from his forehead. His eyes widened when he realized it was blood. Suddenly, a chilling voice echoed in his ears, commanding him to hand over his body. The voice repeated again and again, urging him to surrender. A red aura began to circle his battered frame, swirling like a sinister mist. Hwarin's thoughts raced. He had long been vaguely aware that deep inside his body resided a foreign energy. It was the same power he had glimpsed in that mysterious old man before his regression. He had drawn upon it once during his battle with Instructor Mo. Now, he realized, he could use it again. If he did, it might be enough to defeat the flying demonic bloodlion. The chilling voice continued to echo, demanding his body. Hwarin clenched his teeth. He could feel the force trying to take control of him, dragging his mind toward unconsciousness. If he gave in, if he closed his eyes even for a moment, he feared this power would completely overtake him. But at the brink of surrender, he forced his eyes wide open and shouted inwardly at himself. He asked if he was really going to rely on this power once again. He commanded himself to get a grip. He refused to become dependent on an unknown force. Since when, he asked himself, had Yong Hwarin relied so much on something he could not trust? The phantom voice pressed harder, demanding his body, but he roared back, shouting for it to shut up. Struggling to his feet, he declared that this body was his own, and he alone was its master. The voice was nothing but a phantom from the past. He vowed that he would protect those dear to him by his own strength. With that, his aura flared. In an instant, he leapt forward, bursting back onto the battlefield, and his blade slashed with precise fury. In one decisive stroke, he severed the left arm of the flying demonic bloodlion. The bloodlion screamed in pain, staggering backward and staring at the severed limb. His voice rose in rage as he cursed the boy. Then his gaze locked on the red aura radiating from Hwarin. His eyes widened in horror, and he stammered as he recognized the energy. Trembling, he shouted the name of the demonic master. Stunned, he demanded to know how this youth could possibly wield such a force. Before his body convulsed, and he vomited blood. Nearby, Mo Byung's eyes widened as she observed. She thought to herself that the energy was the same as before, the same power Hwarin had once revealed. Jungwook and Namwook, still battered but alive, staggered back to their feet. Jungwook grinned through his exhaustion and shouted that the young clan leader had arrived at the perfect time. The group regrouped quickly, their swords drawn once again as they faced the weakened bloodlion. Mo Byung assessed the situation aloud. She pointed out that the bloodlion was poisoned and that quite some time had passed since he had burned away his life essence. His body would soon collapse. Hwarin's expression hardened. He spoke clearly and firmly, giving his first order as heir to the clan. He commanded them to survive. The group responded in unison, promising their obedience. The bloodlion's gaze locked on Hwarin. For a long moment, he studied him silently, before tilting his head back and speaking with an unsettling calm. He admitted that he had encountered countless mysteries in the world of Jianghu, but this situation was something even he could not comprehend. Then, with grim resolve, he announced that from this moment onward, he would forfeit his survival. The bloodlion raised his hands toward them, gathering a crushing wave of energy as though preparing one final attack. His voice thundered with scorn. He told Hwarin that he did not know how the boy had reclaimed such power, but he ordered him to squirm as hard as he could, for it would not save him. Hwarin and his companions braced themselves, and at the same time, with blades raised and spirits burning, they all leapt forward into the clash. Later, the Serpent Dragon sect finally arrived at the battlefield. Gochok's furious voice rang out as he cursed. He muttered bitterly to himself that he had not expected the bloodlion to go so far as to expend his life essence. As he advanced across the ruined ground, his eyes widened at the lingering aura still saturating the battlefield. His expression hardened. He recognized it instantly, and whispered in disbelief. It was the bloodlion arts. One of his soldiers called out to him, reporting that they had found the body. Gochok approached, his steps heavy, and looked down on the corpse of the flying demonic bloodlion. Another soldier, pale with fear, informed him quietly that the man was dead. Gochok demanded to know about the flower. The soldier hesitated before answering, his voice trembling. Gochok's fury erupted, and he warned that if the soldier told him it was missing, he would cut off his head where he stood. The soldier finally stammered out the truth. The flower was not there. Enraged, Gochok swung his sword, nearly cutting the man down, but stopped himself at the last moment. His eyes darted over the battlefield, sharp and calculating, and his thoughts seethed. He wondered who it was, who had dared interfere, which fool had fought against the flying demonic blood lion and stolen the demonic poison stone flower.